Hey guys, thank you so much for showing up. We got resident broker Ryan Rosas. We're going to go over these forms. We printed out 30. If you need more, printer's over there. Just hook up your printer and go for it. But before we get into that, there is some housekeeping stuff we do want to go over. So we have 2 upcoming events. Do you mind throwing them up on the screen, Jose? So Ryan was kind enough to share that these are changing daily. Like the information is changing daily. You'd think it would be locked in at this point. Raise your hand if you were here for Marguerite's presentation last week. Okay. The information has changed a little bit since then. Okay. So in keeping with that, you'll probably want to attend August 7th. There's going to be an event hosted by the Friedrichs and Aaron Rawls at on Folsom. So if you drove all the way from the 50 side next week, you don't have to do it. You just show up there. It's on Thursday, August 7th at 10 a.m. Okay. Here, I'll get out of the way. Y'all get it? Cool. So we have that coming up. And then also next Thursday, next Thursday? Is Bob Pipes next Thursday? 15th. The 15th? On the 15th, we have Bill Pipes coming to PCAR. He's an absolute legend, probably one of the most engaging, dynamic speakers we'll have all year long. So make sure if you haven't registered already, you register for that. And then this is a great opportunity not only for you to learn, for you to invite other people. This is broker agnostic, whether they're Remax, Keller, Coldwell, Realty One, or looking to get into real estate. This is a good event to bring them to. And then we will be doing lunch afterwards here at the office. Lunch is free. Well, it will be first come, first serve. We'll probably order 50 to 60 boxes of boudins or sandwiches or whatever. So first come, first serve. But after you attend the training, come back here and have a good time. Meet with Bill, ask him the hard questions, and allow your potential recruits or people looking to join EXP to kind of see what we're all about. We have this beautiful office. That's what we want to use it for. Okay. Any questions on the event? Okay. Real quick, the next update is we have new build construction and Tom Daves. Tom, can you share a little bit about this new development that's coming under?
All right. Hey, it's August. Welcome to August 1, right? I'm excited. July, the heat, it's gone. We're going to have a great. So I'm representing a builder by the name of Paul Bianchi, and he's a custom builder here locally, and he's putting in a development in Roseville, Brookwood Estates. He has full approval. He is raising some money. So if any of y'all have any extra money to invest, or if you have any clients to invest, it's a great investment. And it'll be built out. These are going to be $1.5 to $2 million homes. And we're going to need some help holding them open once it's built out. So it's going to be a pretty cool play for all of us. Here's a quick video about the project.
As Northern California's premier custom home builder, we at Bianchi Tillett have been redefining custom home luxury living. I'm Paul Bianchi, CEO and founder of Bianchi Tillett Development. With over 2 decades of experience, we've become synonymous with quality, innovation, and trust. Our latest venture, Brookwood Estates in Roseville, California, is a 17-home gated community designed for discerning investors like you, reflecting our commitment to excellence and sustainable growth. With a strategic plan of 4 distinct semi-custom home designs, we anticipate a development timeline of 18 to 24 months. Our aggressive marketing approach ensures returns even before the project completes. Envision an ROI of up to 18% in 2 years. Your investment secures you a share in Brookwood Estates with a de-risked position backed by property. Confidence in our project is mirrored by the market, with similar quality homes in the area fetching upwards of $1.2 million. As you can see, we are not just building a home, we are building a future. We are Bianchi Tillett Developers, shaping Northern California's luxury living. Thank you for considering this unique opportunity with us.
Awesome. Thanks. I'll send out an email about this. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks, Johnny.
So if you got some extra rev share, let's put it in that maybe. Last but certainly not least, before we have Ryan, rates are changing for the better, right? We've seen that. Where's the in-house lender?
Jake.
JJ, come on up. All right, everybody give JJ a round of applause.
Hey guys, Good morning to you all. So good to be here. I'm JJ Mack, as you know, and I work with American Pacific Mortgage. I'm a branch manager and a loan officer. And yeah, rates are changing and they're getting better. We're seeing things continue to decrease in that space. Inflation's getting under control. The Fed didn't raise rates yesterday. They kept them the same. And so we're hoping that they continue to look dovishly on these. Now, what they're going to say, what we're seeing is most experts in the space are saying that they're going to lower rates in September. We were thinking a quarter point, but there's even thoughts of maybe a half of a point. So we'll see what happens. But I'm thinking about a quarter point in September is going to be when we're going to see that. But that's not all that matters here. It's not all just about the Fed lowering rates. It's about our economy and what is the whole thing is doing. So the rates are getting lower, and that means there's more opportunities out there for our clients. So we need to be getting that information out to our clients, and that's what we're doing. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about value and what we invent value that we bring to you as a real estate agent and a lending team. And I was thinking about the value, and I was going to talk to you about one specific thing that we do. But I was thinking, you know what? Every single one of you has a different idea of what value is. It's not just what I can bring to one of you, it's what we can bring to every single one of you. And so that's why we have a team that works here. It's not just myself, it's myself and Lindsay and Jake and Kyle and Allison and several other people that are on this team. And so we're not just here to help with an open house or getting you a flyer or whatever it may be that you want to do. Every single one of you does something different, and we want to make sure that we are there for those things. So I can tell you right now, Allison, she is an amazing marketer. If you call her and you tell her, I really want this particular flyer with this information on it, she'll sit down with you and spend a couple hours with you making it perfectly so you can go door to door and handing these out. I know Jake, if you want to sit down with somebody and talk about what you want in your life and what you want in the future of your business, he will sit down with you and make sure that you have your goals plastered on your brain. And not only that, but he's going to make sure he holds you accountable for those things too. Lindsay is going to get your deal done as quickly as you can possibly manage. If you're looking for a quick close, oh my gosh, 14 days is nothing for her. So, I mean, every single person that we have come in here gives you something different of value. And so we would love for you to take that opportunity to come to any of us, tell us what it is that you're looking for, or let us help you get to that decision of what value we can bring to you, and let's have that conversation. Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to close more deals, and that's what we want for everybody here. And I just want to say one more thing. I was coming in this room today, and I was talking to a few of you about the chaos that's coming in a couple weeks. And I've been to a few other offices, and I can say 100%, you guys are the most optimistic bunch of people out of any other group. So EXP has it down, man. You guys are crushing it, and I think you were looking forward to this opportunity. In 2009, we went through Dodd-Frank. I was in the industry, and our complete world changed, where I could not charge an interest rate, and I could not get paid based off interest rate anymore. So we weren't making 3 points anymore. I was making like half to 1%. And so I will tell you though, that brought opportunity, and that opportunity led me to what I was able to become today. And so I can tell you right now that this is an opportunity. Don't let this bring you to the other side of the fence. Use this as an opportunity to go out there and conduct business the way you want to get it and make it what you want, because there is going to be more now than there ever has been before.
Thanks for that.
So anyways, thanks for having me as always. Go ahead.
Can I give you a compliment?
Yeah, sure.
You just saved our clients $500 a month from one lender to the next. So thank you.
Yeah.
That's huge. I can tell me something good. What did you have for Digit? He has 30 seconds. Good questions. All right, you guys screw the question. Do want to learn about
We wanna learn about
contracts. New contracts would be such a popular thing.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks, JJ. All right, everybody. So there's a lot of changes. And the changes, right, Ryan, you said they're coming up like daily.
Yeah. What Johnny kind of hit on it earlier. I was here last week for Marguerite's presentation, and even since then, there's additional changes with us as a business industry, us as a company. And so we just ask that everybody pivot with us, right? We're working through this as best we can to make it as beneficial to the agents as we possibly can. Yeah.
Cool. And so there's been a lot of changes, a lot of different contracts. We printed up 4. We got We printed up 30. Y'all surprised me. I did not think contracts would be this exciting. But we have seller payment to the buyer's broker, the EXP addendum to the listing agreement, the RLA, the new RLA, and the buyer broker agreement. So there's 4. I know there's more changes than that, but we'll save those questions for the end, like things like David, you had like open house questions and whatnot, that things. So with that said, out of these agreements, which one is the one you want to go over first?
Yeah.
Like, what are you feeling the BRBC? Are you feeling the seller payments buyer's broker? Like, what's the one you want to start off with? The RLA listings?
I like Tom's mind.
Listing.
Yeah, I think.
Buyer
All
broker.
right, raise your hand if you want buyer broker.
Fire broker.
Okay,
Either one.
raise your hand if you want listings. Buyer broker wins.
I think buyer
Okay.
broker, yeah. Okay, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ryan Grossos. I am the designated managing broker for eXp Realty in Northern California.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, man.
I've known Johnny and Valerie and Tom and a lot of you guys in this room for many, many years, but if I haven't met you, it's a pleasure to meet you. My job is not as like an active agent. It's literally support for you guys in this room and for others with eXp in California. A lot of changes taking place. JJ, I think, said it really well. I don't know where he went, but one of the things that I shared last week is I love the fact that there's so many people that are attending these because there's a lot of people at other companies or just in the business in general that aren't educating themselves and they're running scared. So like JJ was saying, hey, there's people here that get it, they're not scared. And it's because you're coming in and you're learning about what this is. August 17th is literally weeks away. I'm going to share with you a bunch of stuff on contracts today. Start implementing it now. Don't wait for 2.5 weeks. Just do it now, basically. So buyer broker agreements. So basically moving forward, anytime you work with a buyer, you must have an executed buyer broker representation agreement, right? So the premise is that you're having a conversation with your buyer about your value that you're bringing to them as an agent in the transaction. Traditionally, or what we've known for decades, is that we really haven't had to have that conversation because we've just kind of been getting paid through the seller. We're just going to go and we're going to help you and we're going to be your agent. And so we haven't really been used to using these. The really, really important thing about this is we don't have a choice anymore. And so it's really in everybody's best interest to just become, there's a chair here. Okay. It's in everybody's best interest to become experts at this and really, really, really nail down your value proposition because you need to have a transparent conversation with your buyers now around compensation the same way that we've been having that conversation with sellers over the years when we've been going to list properties. So, yeah.
When you talk about the forms, can you mention like it's BRBC, just
Yes.
those online?
Yeah, so right now we're doing the buyer representation and broker compensation agreement. This is CAR form BRBC. There is an EXP version of this as well that is not quite as long. We have versions of all of these that aren't quite as long. I'm going over the CAR version today because Johnny said that most people here I think are used to this. And so BRBC is what I'm going over. I'm not going to teach this as a contracts class. I want to hit on some of the important things that we need to know about. So what's really, really important about the buyer broker agreement is that there's a restriction in how long. Oh, by the way, let me go back. So August 17th is the settlement date, right? That NAR settled a lawsuit that says that we're going to start using these. Does everybody know that the state of California passed a law that says beginning on January 1st, it's mandatory that we use these. So it's going to become a law in just a few months as well. So if you guys didn't know that, it's not just a settlement thing. So we have to get used to using these because our license is going to require us to use them as well, right? So what's the period of time? So the biggest thing that you guys have to remember is that these cannot exceed 3-month periods. So part of that law that's coming into effect on January 1st says that buyer representation agreements are maxed at 3 months with a few exceptions. That exception would be if the buyer is an investor, and they're incorporated, right? They're a corporation, they're an LLC, some form like that. Then they don't have to have a 3-month restriction. But if it's just your first time home buyer or somebody that you've been working with as an individual, 3 months is the maximum on this, and you can only extend it for 3 months at a time as well. The idea behind that is that you're reestablishing agency relationship over and over again, right? I get that sometimes it takes us 8 months, 10 months to find that right house. We're gonna have to keep redoing these over and over and over again. Sky Slope is working really hard to add another layer. So right now we have listings that you can create and we have transactions that you can create. Sky Slope is working on creating a buyer representation like category as well, so that we can keep these housed. Was anybody on the alpha call with Leo and Holly this morning by chance? Okay, so one of the things they said is, if you're a listing agent, we're not policing these, right? So this is an agreement between a buyer's agent and their buyer.
Hmm.
But we don't have to say, well, I'm not going to let you show the property unless you show me your buyer broker agreement. So as listing agents, we're not policing it. It's not our job. It's the buyer's agent job to ensure that that's being done. So 3 months in, yeah.
Can I ask a question to that?
Yes.
So when we receive the offers, are we requesting them
So
for proof that they
yes.
have?
So remember that you cannot, if there is a buyer broker agreement in place, whatever you negotiate with your buyer, that's the highest number you will be able to get.
Right.
So even if the seller is if I negotiate with you 2% and the seller is willing to offer 3%, you're stuck with 2. So the thing is the SPBB, which is the seller payment to buyer's broker, this is the confirmation that the seller will be paying the obligation in the buyer broker agreement. But if we're asking the seller, if we're a buyer's agent and we're asking the seller to pay the buyer's broker's agreement and we're issuing an SPBB, the seller does have the right to request a copy of the buyer broker agreement to confirm what it is that's being asked for.
Makes sense. Like if they're trying to reduce an appraisal price, show me the appraisal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Valerie.
So if we're representing a buyer and we go to request a showing and the listing agent is like, show me your PRBC, should we fight them back on it and say no?
Yeah. I mean,
Like, where's the line? Where do we go?
so her question is if she has a buyer and she's scheduling a showing with you, Tom, and you say, no, I'm not gonna even allow you to show it unless you show me your BRBC, how far does she fight it, right? So the thing is we're navigating this unknown path. There's gonna be agents out there that aren't doing education like this, right? Like I was saying a minute ago, and they're gonna take that hard stance. I think you got to kind of play that out, fill it out, right? We have a fiduciary role and responsibility to our buyer to do what's in their best interest. If they want to see this house, does that mean, having a conversation with that agent and educating them, right? Because a minute ago, the question that I was answering was, well, can they request this, right? Well, if we're asking them to pay, yes, but if your buyer's just paying you directly and they have no need to see this, right? Just like we have no need to say, show me the listing agreement before I schedule a showing, right? Same kind of concept. So if they're fighting you on it, a lot of it's going to be education. We can get involved to help maybe go broker to broker around that, but it's going to be a transition period with some of these agents learning what is and is not. The other thing, real quick, I'll get to you. The other thing too is, I was talking about how this is going to go into law, but the biggest thing with this, guys, outside of us having our license, it being a licensing issue starting January, is fines. So you have to remember that MLSs are revenue-driven for-profit companies, right? We all use MetroList. The Rapatoni company is not owned by an AOR. They are a family-owned business. They are a for-profit business. And guess where they get their money? And a lot of these MLSs out there are saying the fines that we're going to issue for you not having a buyer broker agreement signed prior to showing are going to be, by the way, no warnings. We're not going to give you any kind of warning. We're going to issue you a $2,500 fine and 3 warnings, and you're out of the MLS. Right? Agents will turn in. Agents are going to turn. That's what's going to happen, right? Agents are going to turn in. So I share that with you not to scare you, but to say, okay, that's how important this is, right? Like it's important for us to really be doing our diligence with these buyers ahead of time. Let's not get caught with our pants down and paying a $2,500 fine. That's just ridiculous. Hold on, real quick. I know you had a question.
So in this transitionary period, Ryan, what are we supposed to say to brokers that are asking for the SPBB and the BRBC when we're still advertising?
Yeah. So the question is, as of today, where there's still compensation being offered through the MLS, that when listing agents are asking for the SPBB to confirm it, you can still do that. There's no issue with doing it. I actually suggest that you do it just to get in good practice. I mean, again, we have just weeks left. You cannot go back. Yeah, once you're in contract, you cannot go back and do a BRBC. Right. What was your question?
Text, I'm brand new, but just texting and communicating, oh, I saw this house on Zillow or whatever, that's fine, but once you actually want to physically show that house.
Great question. Yeah, so the question is, what constitutes where like buyer broker agency comes in, right? So if I have you on a drip campaign, if I'm the listing agent and you call me up and say, hey, can you tell me a little bit about the house? I'm hosting an open house and you walk in and I'm telling you about the house. We don't need a buyer broker agreement. Once I start providing you guidance as an agent for the buy side, we need a buyer broker agreement. That's when it comes into play. So it's a big gray, right? Because a lot of times we're just having conversations. It's me and Tom just kind of chatting, and then it starts developing into this conversation, right? So we just need to get into the practice of, okay, learning when that transition is happening for you. Every single one in this room, it's going to be different for, right? And so learning to see what that looks like so that you can start having that conversation around the buyer broker agreement. Yes.
But so it's in the left, it's going to think should be fine. So,
yeah. So the question, oh yeah.
Them, I don't understand how now they're going to be involved in this because our contracts between.
Great question. Yeah, great question. So the question is, how is the MLS going to know, right? Because the MLS is essentially issuing these huge fines, and this is MLSs across the country, right? It's not local to us, right? But what's happened is the majority of MLSs across the country are actually association owned. And the associations, for the most part, like the California Association of Realtors, is a subchapter of the National Association. So they are bound by the settlement, and subsequently the MLSs that they own are bound. Now, our MLS, MetroList, is not owned by the association. However, like Clear Cooperation, which is going to go away, they have adopted a similar rule. And so they say, listen, we don't want to be sued. MetroList Repertory says we don't want a lawsuit. We're just going to do the same thing, right? And so anytime we find out, right, they're not going to be proactive about going out and looking for you. But if you've been in this business long enough, agents will turn agents in, unfortunately, right? And so that's what happens, and that's going to be their enforcement arm. Yes.
And the agents are gonna know, because when you submit the offer, you're gonna have the BRBC dated after when you showed it.
Or you won't have it at all.
Or you won't have it at all.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So if you're asking the seller as a buyer's agent to pay the buyer broker agreement, then the seller and the listing agent have a right to a copy of the buyer broker agreement. And if they see that you wrote your offer yesterday, but the buyer broker agreement's today, and then that deal goes sour and the negotiations break down, all the stuff that happens, right? And then that agent's going to be like, hello, compliance, right? Yes.
Yeah, so probably going back a little bit, you mentioned that if the BRBC has a number and our listing agreement has a number that we're willing to offer as concession, is there another form in there that we have to write this on, or is it?
No.
I just rewrite my listing agreement.
So I'll touch a little bit on that. The question is, if the buyer broker agreement has an agreement to pay whatever it may be, 2%, and the seller is willing to offer a concession or pay to the buyer's broker a higher percentage, let's say 4%, right? And there are sellers out there, by the way, just to kind of segue, there are sellers out there that are in the sales business and absolutely understand the value of compensating an agent on the other side. So it's not going to disappear. And so there are ways for us to handle that. So to your question of what do I do with my buyer broker agreement? Once you go in and write that offer, it's done. You cannot adjust it. So even if the seller is willing to offer more, it's too bad, so sad, unfortunately.
Specifically, my question was, is there another form between those two? Because I have it on my listing agreement. If I get a buyer broker.
So
I thought you mentioned there's another.
So there is another form. So let me kind of segue to the listing agreement really quickly. So the listing agreement no longer has broker to broker compensation. We as a company, not only is the listing agreement that removed it, we as a company say you cannot offer broker to broker. Let me elaborate on what broker to broker is. I am charging as a listing agent 6%. I am sharing 3% of my 6% that I'm earning with you. That's broker to broker, right? Moving forward, I am only charging my services. I'm charging 4% as the listing agent. In the listing agreement, and this is kind of a bit of a change from last week when we were here, we can add language. The seller is willing to consider concessions to pay the buyer's broker. The seller is willing to pay the buyer's broker's compensation.
You can or you can't?
Can. But that is, even though that language is in there, it's a willingness, right? It's a seller's willingness to do it. Like the seller is willing to offer a credit to replace a roof. What happens when that offer comes in? Well, then it gets negotiated directly between the buyer and seller at that time. So if the seller is willing to offer something, and let's say it's the opposite, right? Let's say that the buyer broker agreement has 3%, but the seller is offering or willing to offer 2%. There's nothing that prohibits the buyer from negotiating that 2% up to 3%. It just can't go, it can't go down, right? It can't go the other way. It can't go from, yeah. Sorry. Now I'm crossing myself with all these numbers, but they are two different things, the buyer broker agreement and the listing agreement. So there's no broker to broker, but you can include in additional terms that the seller is willing to consider concessions. The seller is willing to pay a buyer's broker. You also can market that outside of the MLS. So we were told for a bit that we could not market that at all. If Tom gave me a call, right, and said, Ryan, is your seller willing to do this? Initially, we said, no, you can't even have that conversation. You can have those conversations. It just cannot be involved with the MLS. That includes websites. So anything that is within 2 clicks of a website of the MLS, it cannot have any kind of conversation around compensation. So what we mostly see with websites is that there's an IDX feed. So for those of you that don't know what an IDX feed is, it's an authorization from the supplying MLS to promote those listed properties on your personal website, as an example, right? So that IDX feed is 1 click away. So you wouldn't be able to talk about compensation. If you had a single property, right, you take a luxury listing over in Granite Bay and you have a website dedicated solely to that property, and it does not have an IDX feed, you can have those conversations, right? So again, we're morphing, we're understanding this a little bit different as we go on, week to week, day by day, right? So yes, question.
How it's gonna be with the current listing that's overlapping the time when this whole process starts? Do we have like commission in there, the MLS?
Great question. So let me answer that really quickly, and then I'll go to your next question. The question is, I have an existing listing that has co-op in there, right? I took the listing 4 months ago on the old RLA that has it full. So obviously moving forward, the MLS isn't going to have that. We do have an amendment to the real estate listing agreement that basically says, hey, listen, that cooperating broker compensation is going away and we're going to make an adjustment. So we have a form that we designed here specifically for that. Otherwise, you would have to go, if you want to use a CAR form, it's the modification of terms, and the modification of terms is now split into 2. There's a buyer's representation version and there's a listing agreement version. Correct, yes. So real quick before, I know you had a second question. So if the language in the modification of terms, if you use the CAR version, you need to make sure that you're adjusting the total compensation, because before our agreement between you as a seller and me as the agent was 6% total and 3 and 3. You need to adjust that to say, well, it's now just 3%. And then remove it from MLS, correct?
So the second question is, the BRBC, like, how is that enforceable if your client goes to the bills?
Okay, how is the buyer representation agreement enforceable if a client goes to a new build? So the new build's really no different. The buyer broker representation agreement is a requirement when you're working with a buyer, regardless if they're going to a new build or a resale, right? Most new home builders, most of them offer some type of referral. and I say the term referral because they usually take the client over, right? For the most part, there are some builders that don't, and they establish agency relationship. But for the most part, it becomes a referral and you're simply collecting a referral fee. If agency relationship is still there and they're offering some type of compensation, well, then it's going to be whatever the buyer broker agreement states, up to the max of that. And sometimes the builders will they'll offer a flat fee, right? Or they have a tiered system. So it's going to be based on builder to builder.
If they go to Lennar, you're wrong, but
There are some builders out there that basically say, nice, yeah, I don't care.
How is that gonna work if like some random person shows up at a place like Lennar, so to speak? Are they gonna then require that they sign that form before they go look at the models?
Is Lennar gonna ask
Any builder?
no, builders aren't required to have their prospective buyers do this, right? So this is something that we as realtors, as of today, realtors are required, not as of today, as of August 17th, but for lack of better explanation. So are required to do as a membership to our association, we're required to do it. And then in a few months, it's going to be a law. But builders are selling their own inventory, right? They're not representing a client in a sale of somebody else's property. They're selling their own property. So it is a little bit different. And they have their own contracts and all that fun stuff. Real quick, I know she was waiting on a question.
Going back to the marketing, we were told in the last meeting, nothing. Now the IDX page, I understand. Can we have social media, sign writers, like where's the
Yes.
line drawn?
Yeah. So a great question. So the question is, what can we do with marketing? So I had an agent, gosh, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago that was talking to me about, she's seen sign writers out there that says, I think buyer's agent friendly or something along those lines. And at that time, we were like, no, like stay away from it, right? But again, yes, we can. What it really boils down to is we cannot advertise on the MLS what that is. Now, I will put a little asterisk on that. We have, when you're a listing agent, you have a fiduciary duty to your seller to get the best possible terms, the best possible deal. So if you're advertising to the world that they're willing to offer a concession, there may be a buyer out there that doesn't need that, right? And so are we costing our seller money? Potentially, right? I don't know, but that's the kind of stuff to keep in mind. But yes, sign writers you can do. You just can't have anything. We cannot have any kind of compensation that connects back to the MLS. But if I want to pick up the phone and call you and say, is your seller offering to pay my commission? We can have that conversation. Yes. Now, again, my buyer still has to negotiate that in the contract because our conversation isn't contractually binding, right? So it has to still be negotiated. But the idea is that we're having a conversation to understand, just like if I was calling you and saying, hey, listen, I saw the property and the carpet's got cat pee smell and it's gross. Is the seller willing to consider a concession to replace the carpet? We have those kind of conversations, right? Yeah, Drew.
Explain what point we have to start with giving them a form, sign calls.
You weren't paying attention, were you, Drew? So I've known Drew for years and years. Yeah, Drew was asking at what point do we get the buyer broker agreement signed and things like sign calls. So sign calls, no, we're a listing agent. Again, we have that responsibility to our seller to get their property sold and to market it. So if we get a sign call or we're hosting an open house, something like that, we don't have to have a buyer broker agreement. When we have to switch to a buyer broker agreement is when we start talking to that buyer about anything that's to their benefit.
Yeah, my question. Follow up with it. Okay, so this guy's talking to me about this. Right, can you help me right now?
Right, then you need a buyer broker agreement.
Okay, so that, make sure that it's included. Okay, so is that the point where I need to tell them, look, I have to stop the conversation and send you this before it.
Yes. Yeah. So Drew's question is, okay, I'm at an open house of my listing and a buyer comes in and they're unrepresented and they say, you're talking to them about the house and different things. And at that point, the buyer says, hey, listen, can you represent me as well? The conversation stops right there. And then you go to the buyer broker. I can, but we have to have a conversation about the representation. First, it is required that we do this. And really quick, I want to touch, I know there's a lot of questions and I'm kind of diverting over contracts, but that's good because it's an organic conversation. On the CAR listing agreement and the EXP listing agreement, one of the things that you guys will see on here is additional compensation to seller's broker if buyer is unrepresented. I want to clarify this. That is if the buyer is genuinely unrepresented. I want to write an offer on this house. I do not want an agent. I don't want you as my agent, Drew. I don't want Johnny as my agent. I want nobody. It's genuinely an unrepresented buyer. Few and far between. I get that, right? But it can happen. Maybe it's an attorney, right? They come in, they know contract, they know law, they're willing to write it on their own. Totally fine. But there's more legwork for the listing agent because now you're essentially, for lack of a better explanation,
Paperwork.
acting as a TC for the buyer's agent, right? You're chasing all this stuff. There's a little bit more work. So should you charge your seller more? That's up to you. That's the conversation you have during the listing agreement.
Wait, time out. So that portion in the list RLA that
Mhm.
talks about the paperwork and we're not representing the buyer, and then they sign the BNA, right?
Yeah, correct.
It says that we're doing paperwork for them. They can't write an offer on just a normal form, can they? Are we gonna accept that as EXP?
Okay, so a couple clarifying things. So the question is a genuinely unrepresented buyer. There's documents out there like the buyer non-agency, the BNA, that allows us to provide documentation to the buyer. So yes, we can give them, we
RPA.
just can't tell them, we cannot advise them, we can't say anything, right? When we talk about the compensation for unrepresented, it's because what happens when that comes back and 4 initials are missing and this signature is missing. It's like we're kind of doing TC work. We're chasing down stuff. Hey, there's stuff that's missing here. But the unrepresented buyer is not required to use car forms. Nobody is required to use car forms. We, as a brokerage, we can't force that. We can't legally say you have to use this. We prefer it. We know them inside and out. As a broker, I want to see those kind of things because I'm an expert at it. But if somebody gets a cocktail napkin and me and you write an agreement and we sign it, can it be contractually binding? Possibly, right? And we aren't attorneys. We can't say that's unenforceable. It's not a real contract.
And you're gonna allow it through Sky Slope in our file.
Can't say no. We can't say no. We're not a party to the transaction. If the buyer and the seller decide to write up just a generic blank paper with a contract, that's their agreement. We have no authority to force them to use something else.
Okay.
As much as I want them to use these, I'm not a party to the contract.
And just to clarify, because I do think listing agents, like especially ones that are like discount, are gonna be taking this like 1% there in that section for filling out the paperwork. Do they not fill out the paperwork? Can they?
Correct. So
We give them our car forms, which shouldn't be allowed.
well, so we have a license to these, right? As members of the California Association of Realtors, we are licensed to utilize these forms. When we represent a seller, it is in our seller's interest to get the deal done, which means that if a genuinely unrepresented buyer comes in and they don't have a contract, because we're members of CAR and we're representing our client in their interest, we can provide a blank copy of that. We just cannot advise and guide on it in any way, shape, or form.
We can counter them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Hey, Brian, would it be something that is advised by you, maybe a good idea for us to bring to any open house now buyer broker agreements?
Great question.
Can we have that? Been doing from long as I can remember, you bring check-in sheets.
Yep.
Right? So you get the information. Would it be something that right next to our check-in sheet, we have buyer representation.
Yeah.
Ready to go in case we do run across that, we're ready.
Yeah, great question. So for those of you that can't hear, Drew's question is, I'm hosting an open house. Do I have blank buyer broker agreements there? So that if I start having that conversation, absolutely, right? I can tell you, I love open houses. I built my business on the back of open houses. We probably hosted open houses together, Drew, you and I, right? Like, I absolutely love open houses. Yeah, I mean, there's such a great way to generate leads and have a great conversation and rapport with people. Absolutely be prepared to have that conversation about the buyer broker agreement. I would absolutely do that.
And you guys have provided that one pager for that specific property. So you can we just lock them in for 30 days to negotiate on that specific property, show them your value. and
Correct.
have them official.
Correct. One of the EXP forms that we have internally created is the single property showing agreement, I believe is exactly what it's called. But yeah, it's exactly that. So they come in, they're interested in the house. We have that conversation. Listen, we'll do a single property for this house and I'll talk to the seller about it, right? Yeah, maybe your cousin down in LA wants to be your agent, but if you don't have a buyer broker with that guy and you want to kind of get on the bandwagon today with this, we'll sign a single property. So it's only specific to this. Absolutely. And we do have that house in Sky Slope forms. Yes.
Think of a buyer broker and our buyer goes into an open house and they find another buyer broker and they move forward in that transaction.
Okay, great question. So I'm going to repeat it again because everybody on Zoom. So the question is, I have a buyer broker already signed and my client walks into an open house and that agent that's hosting the open house says, okay, well, let's sign a buyer broker together. So if you guys look at the CER version of the buyer broker agreement, you'll see right there under the title, it says non-exclusive. Unless, so buyer representation and broker compensation agreement, non-exclusive. So it defaults to being non-exclusive unless exclusive is checked and initial. So the idea is if it's going to become an exclusive list buyer representation agreement, you're having that conversation with your buyer that this is exclusive to our relationship. And they're going to initial to acknowledge that so that when they walk in, right, they're going to tell them, hey, and remember,
Where's that?
Yeah, where?
Yeah. A2.
Just so they would-
Yep, 3 or 2A2 type of representation at defaults, right?
And my next question is, like, say, we have a conversation that we're exclusive.
Right.
So what does that mean? So if they go with another agent, do they, their responsibility for.
Yeah, so the question is, okay, so we have that detailed conversation, right? And they still sign another buyer broker agreement and go into contract. So what most agents think is, we're gonna chase that agent, right? And we're gonna get the compensation, but no, the agreement isn't with that other agent and there's no MLS cooperating broker clear cooperation is disappearing as a result of all of this, right? What that means is the client's on the hook. Now, what does that actually look like? We're gonna navigate it. Does it mean that we have to take them to small claims court? Does it mean that we say, gosh, it was a mistake and we'll learn because you're a great referrer? We don't know. We're going to navigate that. Yes.
Well, the follow-up question would be, what's the point of a buyer broker agreement if it's not exclusive? Like, that means, okay, you're dating me this week, but next week it was.
It's like college, right? Yeah.
Whoa, I thought we were exclusive.
Yeah, I thought we were exclusive, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What does exclusive mean if it's not exclusive? So that's my editorial comment. You can answer that if you want, but my question is regarding as a listing agent. If I have a 6% commission and an unrepresented buyer comes in and I in the listing agreement, it says how much that seller's going to give to the cooperating broker. If there's no buyer's broker to give it to, do I keep that as the listing agent?
The answer is no. So to answer the question, so the question is, I in my listing agreement, it's 6%, and the seller is willing, he put in the other terms that he's willing to cooperate or offer a concession to a buyer's broker agreement, and a client comes in, a buyer comes in that is completely unrepresented. Do I get to keep the difference? No, because if you're representing the client, right, you have to then get a buyer broker agreement and negotiate it between the buyer and seller. So as the listing agent that your seller's willing to do it, so you can put that into the negotiations.
That's the way it is now.
That's essentially the way it is now, but it has to be in the contract between the buyer and seller. You can't just like now on your listing.
It's amended.
I come in and I say, I want you to represent me, you automatically get the difference, right? Moving forward, it has to be negotiated between the buyer and seller. Because if they're genuinely unrepresented, you're not their agent, right?
Okay, so is that memorialized in the RPA that I present representing them? Or is it, I have to get a buyer broker agreement separate?
If you're actually going to represent them as a buyer, before you write that offer, you have to get a buyer broker agreement. And then the buyer and seller negotiate it in the purchase agreement.
And then is that a conversation that obviously I'm gonna have a verbal conversation with my seller, but to memorialize that I've let them know this, is it the buyer broker agreement that I present to my seller, or is it the RPA that informs my?
Well, so remember, so this is double lending. So a dual agency versus double lending is a little bit different, right? When you're double ending a deal, well, no, because dual agency, I can be the listing agent and you can be the buyer's agent. That's dual agency. Double lending is me doing both, right? And that's tough, right? Because I have, again, going back to fiduciary roles, who do I serve first, the seller or the buyer, right? And guys, I said this last week in Marguerite's class, I would not be surprised if California eliminates double-ended deals. I would not be surprised. It's just my guess, but the way that this state is already adapting to industry changes, I would not be surprised. But as of today, it's still allowed, right? And so what does that look like? It means that if the buyer genuinely wants you to represent them, you have to get a buyer broker agreement first. And then you have the knowledge that the seller's willing to cooperate. So you as the buyer's agent are going to write that into the offer, but you're not necessarily going to take that buyer broker agreement directly to the seller because you still have a responsibility to that buyer as well, right? So it has to become a negotiation. Yeah.
Ryan, the RPA allows for that. There's another document that you attach to the offer for that exact purpose.
For changing?
So for negotiating buyer broker compensation with the seller.
Right, the seller payment to buyer broker. But what he's saying is, but you still have that SPBB, which is the seller payment to buyer broker. You have to have a buyer broker agreement first, right? So that's what I'm. Oh, correct, correct. Yeah. Question.
So I want to go back to the topic that you brought up about you have, the buyer broker with someone, even if it's an exclusive. And the client, because this is all gray waters for everybody, especially for the clients out there right now. And everybody's probably way more experienced than me. But I can just imagine, your client doesn't understand what's going on. They sign this thing with you, great, let's go do this. And you check the box, say it's exclusive. They go out some way, they buy a house with someone else. And then the question that I don't know was clearly answered was, what do we do? And so from a reputational standpoint, now, am I gonna go chase someone and take them to small claims court? Because now in today's society with social media, what are they gonna do? They're gonna.
You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. And so what happens is we have to get dang good on having conversations with our buyers when we're discussing the buyer representation agreement and compensation. And the conversation has to get scripts and practice in the mirror, just like with a listing presentation, right? You got to get dang good at having that conversation, because what happens is, yes, it may be exclusive. Yes, I thought we were dating. Maybe we weren't dating. What does that look like, right? Is it going to happen? Is that buyer going to go out there? It's going to happen. We all know it's going to happen, right? What do you as the agent that got burned want to do? And you hit the nail on the head, because we live in this era where our business is built on reputation for the most part. I mean, we got people like Tom that can sell a tree to a forest, right? But like a lot of people out there are very relationship based, and it's built on your reputation. And are you going to be the person that sues your clients? No. I don't know. I don't know what we're navigating that all together. So
chasing them down for years when we already did
this. With listings, right?
So
stuff like
why
that.
are we gonna do it
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
So if you find out that your buyer that you have this exclusive with gets into contract with another buyer, can you then go and talk to the listing agent and say, hey, look, no, I have this agreement.
You cannot, because you can't interfere with the contract between the buyer and the seller.
If it's escrow, knowing they're in escrow, can you submit your buyer broker agreement saying I'm supposed to get paid?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So the question is, if there is a buyer broker agreement and they work with somebody else and they get into contract and you submit it to escrow, I don't know the answer to that question. I think for the most part, if you guys have ever dealt with an escrow dispute, the escrow holders say, really? I don't know, right? I assume
But
it will be simple.
they would not disperse funds though until it's figured out.
Yeah, likely. But again, going back to the
Recurring
reputation
costs.
base, right? So let's just say theoretically that I'm the agent that represents, you had that buyer broker and I'm the agent. And I had a genuine conversation with our buyer and he lied to me. I've never talked to an agent before, right? And so he signs this agreement with me. now I'm a bit hoodwinked as well, right? And so again, it kind of goes back to, there's going to be a lot of specific scenarios that we can't predict everything, and we're going to have to navigate what that looks like. And
Two buyers agents come to an agreement and split the commission.
that could be a possibility. Maybe they split it, right? Or maybe there's a referral fee. There's, I mean, all kinds of stuff that happens, that even today with listings, in very similarly with that kind of stuff, right? But we're going to see. Yeah.
Regarding going back to the buyer situation, if I've got an agreement with you, my buyer, for 2.5%, and the listing side is willing to pay 3%, what happens to that?
The listing side can't say that.
It's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone.
Okay, so then is there a provision where I could say with my buyer, okay, it's 3%, unless they're only offering 2.5%, then I'll just take the 2.5%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you can accept less, right? So if you have a buyer broker agreement with me and it's 3%, and the seller is only willing to offer 2% concession or payment to the buyer's broker, you can do one of two things. You can just say, okay, I'll take the 2%, or you can say, he's giving me 2%, you owe me the other 1%, right? Or, yeah.
Or I'll take 2.5, whatever.
Or whatever it may be, or whatever it may
So I can
be.
take less.
You can take less, you just can't take more. Correct.
So
Yeah.
can you come after your buyer, if you agreed for 3, they're offering 2. Right? Do you have to say, okay, I have to take 2, or is it?
That is a business decision. Each person in this room is a business owner, right? You guys decide. We talked about things like reputation. We talked about things about compensation. These are industry changes, but each one of you runs your business the way you run your business. And if you want to chase that extra 0.5% as an example, that's a decision that you have to take everything into consideration for, right? Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw a quick scenario out there. I've heard this, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's caps, right? If you put 10% down or more, then you can get 6% credit. If you don't put 10% down, you can get up to like a 3% credit for an FHA loan, right? That's the max. I believe Fannie and Freddie and the lending institutions have decided to be able to add additional concessions. So you can still get your full 6% for the buy downs and the loan and escrow closing fees. In addition, get your fees covered.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And the
So,
loan.
yeah.
It's
So,
not
and
gonna- it's not
JJ's
gonna
probably
add to
better.
the 6%.
Yeah, JJ's probably better to answer a lot of those, but yes, that kind of question in regards to how lenders have changed the concession
Yes.
and the credits and things like that in consideration of this. But yes, I do believe that is a possibility now. And what does that look like, right? So is the buyer genuinely paying the buyer broker
the
fee?
loan.
And then there's a concession that's coming in. I personally recommend to negotiate the seller to pay the buyer broker directly,
Yeah.
but maybe they don't. Maybe they want to do it as a concession. And one of the things that I talked about last week with in Marguerite's class is that, okay, well, if there is a concession coming in, is that concession best used for our compensation? Right? Maybe the roof needs replaced or whatever it may be. And that's why, in my opinion, it's best to negotiate a direct buyer to broker payment. So that any additional concessions outside of our compensation can still benefit our client, but have a conversation with the lender.
So if they can afford it, right?
Right.
But if they can't, typically anyways, the way it goes now is you can get 3% max credits. You can potentially get 6% max credits for special loans or wherever their finances are. In addition, you can only get 6.
Mhm.
So you get your full 6 for the roof, get your full 6
Right.
for that. But in addition, if they don't have the money to pay that difference, then you're going to get that extra, which the lenders approve now.
Yeah, so again, talk to the lender, talk to the lender about it, but
Yeah.
there are gonna be ways that those seller concessions can be utilized to the benefit of the buyer's broker compensation. So absolutely, but I encourage you guys, because that's gonna take that really great relationship with the lender. There are lenders out there, just like there's agents out there, there are bad lenders out there, right? So you get a really, really good relationship going with the lender, and so that it's somebody that you can trust and have proper guidance for as things like this, because this might not be the only change on the lending side, right? Something may change in 6 months from now. We could have a shift in the political atmosphere in this country, right? And everything change.
Or third parties paying the fees.
Right. So just keep, yeah.
Real quick, so this morning I was listening to one of the national EXP classes and they said no concession, no verbiage needs to be, and it was I think from just maybe even yesterday.
Yeah.
They said no verbiage about concessions related to compensation. So what
Yeah, and I'm not sure which one you watched, but that has been our stance, is that nothing goes in there, right? If you guys watched last week, Leo, who's our CEO of Realty, did a podcast. He was vacationing in Catalina, and he did a podcast, and he's done a bunch of podcasts throughout the last week and a half or so. And then he was on the Alpha Call this morning, and I think I saw Steve or somebody was saying they were on the Alpha Call, but he reinforced it. So we are allowing agents. So let me clarify this. If the seller wants to provide a concession or pay for a buyer's broker compensation, we can include that language in other terms in the listing agreement. But what we're saying is that the seller is willing to negotiate or consider the concession. Ultimately, what prevails is the purchase agreement, because that's where it's going to get negotiated. Because the seller could tell me today, yes, I'm willing to do it, but tomorrow they change their mind, right? And so they have to consider it. But what we won't put in the listing agreement at all is that they are guaranteeing a payment to the buyer's broker, right? It has to be a considered payment, and it's not coming out of our commission. So it's not broker to broker.
So is there official EXP verbiage that we need to use?
So let me give this a sec here. I can give you some really great verbiage here. So yeah, and while I'm pulling this up, what other questions you guys have?
While he's pulling this up, two quick things. One, there's a new LO on JJ's team. We forgot to announce him this morning. Everybody say hi to Sam. You guys know Sam, he's married to the new. He's now on JJ's team as an LO. So yeah, round of applause for him. Okay. The second thing we forgot to, go ahead.
Yeah. Second thing is just wanted to pass out some of these flyers. Some of you guys wanted some info on the Brookwood.
Boom.
Thanks.
All right. Third thing is, raise your hand if you really appreciated Frank's presentation last week on viral. Okay. It was good. Valerie loved it. Mark liked it. Crystal liked it. If we can get 10 people to sign up, I've already signed up. I think Mark signed up, so we need 8 more.
Whose presentation?
Frank Picard.
Oh, yeah, great.
Yeah, you liked him?
Yeah.
So if we get 10 people to sign up, he's gonna give us some type of group discount. So just go ahead and sign that up and get it over to Mark, and we'll do that. All right, this commercial break is now over. It depends on what you sign up for, but probably, what, do you know what it is, Mark?
Normally it's like $2,000 to start off with, like $7 a month. You look at this deal, people sign up.
So it's so currently what I paid was $2,000 plus a $750 a month sign up or monthly fee.
The 90-day money back guarantee.
90-day money back guarantee, should you decide, hey, this isn't working out for me.
So you get the $2,000 plus the $750 times 3 months
So
back?
you would get like the
Whole thing?
over $4,000 back, yeah.
That's
All
why
right.
you should go to those meetings.
Yeah.
That's why you should go. Yeah.
I will share this with Johnny so that he can share it out. I know you have a question, but here, I'll read this. So the question we're asking leadership, are we changing our guidance on allowing agents to use additional terms fields to write in seller to buyer's agent direct compensation? And the answer is yes. The best practice and preference is not to provide a dollar amount or percentage amount in additional terms of the agreement. This can be best executed by running the numbers with the seller using the seller's estimated proceeds sheet. And so here's examples of what of some language that can go in. And again, I'll send these out to Johnny. Seller is willing to offer seller concessions. Seller is willing to offer X in seller concessions. All seller concessions are negotiable. Seller is willing to consider compensation to a buyer broker. So you see how the language in there is, it's a willingness, it's a considering, it's not binding itself, right? So because what becomes binding is the contract of purchase agreement. And then it says, this is best communicated verbally or through mediums outside of the MLS.
I'm sorry, why is it even necessary? I don't even know why we're discussing this. I don't even know why we would need to put this in the listing agreement if they may consider.
I agree with you. Actually, I totally.
Like if you have the conversation, but it's in the
Yeah.
listing agreement, there's really no point in my opinion.
I think the premise, I agree with you because it's not binding.
More importantly,
It's
can
like
we put in confidential remarks,
No.
seller may consider
Absolutely not.
No.
With the MLS, it's off the table.
But you can have it on your sign writer.
Booyah. Okay, so, but, yeah, so the MLS is off the table, confidential remarks, coming up with something really clever, like capitalizing this letter and that letter.
Bill.
Trust me, they know what you're doing.
They're willing to look at all offers. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, if you're
of course.
$300,000 down, they're not gonna accept
Right.
it, just like if you give them a crap
So you-
offer, they're not gonna go, yeah, we'll take a
Yeah.
crap offer and compensate you.
But you're right, I mean, putting that language in there, there's no, I think it's really more about educating.
Yeah.
Right, Mr. Seller, there's gonna be buyers out there that do not have the financial capacity to afford to pay certain items. I want to prepare you for offers that may come in that include concessions. Let me show you what the net sheets look like. Go to your listing, if you're not going to your listing appointments with net sheets, shame on you, do it, right?
Chicago one, I use it all the
Yeah,
time.
go
Let
with
me
that
pull it
shit.
up, property tax specific, yeah.
You should already know what
You
their
should be
loan
doing
balance
that,
is.
right? And having that conversation, yeah.
So, a quick painful story. Several years ago, when I was young and dumb and gullible, meaning last week, I had a buyer come in at an open house. Started working with me, decided it wasn't the right time, waited a year later, contacted me and said, hey, I'm ready to buy now. Cool. Did the buyer broker meeting, presented the buyer broker agreement. Said, Tom, where am I gonna go? I came to you. I'm like, okay, sounded logical, so I bought it. Went, showed him several properties. Said he wanted to put things on hold. A week later, the listing agent on the property I showed him called me and said, hey, your buyer just presented an offer to another agent. I was like, furious. So I'm like, what do I do? Now, at the time, all we had to go on was to go to the board of realtors and present our case. His broker was worthless. My broker did all we could, but he wasn't a member of the board of realtors. So we had no recourse. Now, I know in today's world, that would never fly because I failed, or in the new world, because I failed to get the buyer broker agreement. However, my case at the time was procuring cause. So am I wrong to assume that procuring cause is out the window as well? Because the only procuring
Dig a
cause.
hole and bury it, it's gone.
It's,
Wow,
so,
wow.
so bottom line, if I don't have a broker agreement and I don't present, even that's not even.
Think about it, right? When we have the seller, we have a listing agreement. When we have the buyer, we have to have a buyer broker agreement. Where's the procuring cause, right? Now, again, your client may go use somebody else against the agreement, right? But that's not procuring cause, right? It's not the other agent that is taking your client. It's your client that is ditching you, right? That's voiding your contract or doing something, right? And again, that's why those conversations, right? We gotta get so freaking good at these conversations, just like we have with listing agreements and listing appointments that we've done over the years. And I know, I hope I'm not running
No,
over.
no,
any
you're
time.
good, you're good.
Yeah.
I just wanted, I know there's tons of questions, we could do this all day long, but I don't think, have you gone over this form yet?
So not quite. So
this is
touched a little
probably
bit.
the most important form in my ignorant opinion, because whether you're representing a seller or you're representing a buyer, you are gonna see this. If your buyer has chosen to move forward with you, you're gonna have to use this.
Seller payment to buyer broker. This is the CAR version. We do have an EXP version of this as well. But basically, if the seller is paying the buyer's broker compensation, they're fulfilling the obligation of the buyer broker agreement. It has to be memorialized in this. Because otherwise, because again, it's a contract, it's a negotiation directly between the buyer and seller. So if it's not memorialized in this, it's unenforceable.
And we're also just submitting the EXP form on top of it.
You can use either one.
Either one will suffice for the file.
Either the CAR SPBB or we have our version, which is a seller payment to buyer broker. The reason we created it is there's a lot of states, these are national forms for EXP. There's a lot of states that have, literally this morning on the call, they were saying that there's something like 16 states that haven't done any forms revisions at all. It's crazy. It's crazy. So we've created forms. But here at CAR, we have a lot of really good supportive documents, including this one. So this one's a perfectly acceptable and usable one.
So is this the one we're gonna give to title? Which are we gonna give for like, you know?
Well, this gets incorporated into the
So all of
purchase,
it? Okay.
right? So when you check box 3G3 that says the seller's gonna do it, it's gonna automatically populate this, you're gonna complete it, and it's gonna become part of the purchase contract that's gonna go to the escrow holder.
Now, what I saw on this and why I wanted to make sure that we cover this is because somebody submitted this on one of our properties, right? On one of our listings. New to us, we were in a hurry to get the deal done, and they wanted compensation in excess of what our seller was willing to offer. So in order to get the deal done, that was gonna come out of my side, the listing agreements side. So make sure before you agree to this and everybody completes this, that this is correct.
Yeah, or
Counter it.
you
Or
counter it.
Or counter it. But if it's in there and you don't attach it,
That's right.
is your seller gonna pay that? No, you're probably gonna pay
That's
it,
right. That's right. But yeah,
Really.
yeah,
So read this form. That's what I'm saying. This is
Yeah.
the form that buyer sellers, you're all
At
gonna
the
be
end of the
seeing.
day, this is the form.
Ryan,
This is the form.
yeah.
I hate to put you on the spot.
Uh-oh, Barry,
But
okay.
I don't hate too bad enough not to do it. Because this has happened before in the past. Where we had a buyer broker agreement.
Mhm.
And the broker, because everyone knows buyer broker agreement is actually not with me, the agent.
Correct,
The buyer broker is actually with the broker.
right.
Is the broker or is EXP going to enforce these buyer broker?
Yeah, so we
agreements
touched on that a little bit,
they-
Barry. So we're navigating that. We're open to everything. What I was saying before is,
The broker.
do you as an agent, right, because we build a lot of stuff on reputation, do you want to pursue that? Is it, were you genuinely burned? We will absolutely be open-minded to pursuing anything, what's in the best interest of our agents.
Okay.
But part of what it is where is it that it makes sense for you as a business owner, right? Are you wanting to chase that? I can't make that decision for you, Barry, right? But if you do, we may say, hey, listen, the commission on this would have been $10,000. We'll release you to go pursue it in small claims court. Right, so
if they present this and the percentage is less than what the seller's willing to do, how would you counter it?
Can you ask that question again?
yeah, so if the seller payment to buyer broker, his question was if the buyers present this and it's less than what the seller is willing to pay or more, then and you represent the seller, then you need to counter. You need to counter it down. So the seller needs to know, again, going back to that net sheet, right? We were talking about that net sheet for X amount that you were willing to offer. They're asking for more. So either you're going to agree to the more, or we need, just like any other term, we need to counter it out.
So you just do a seller counter?
A seller counter.
Is there
Either,
verbiage?
either increase the
What verbiage
price
are we using?
or.
So you would just say, so
Seller
I actually like to take
agrees, blah, blah, blah.
language directly off of these documents, right? So seller payment to buyer's broker shall not exceed X percentage, right? Or some, I take the language right off.
Yeah.
When I do
Just
counter
copy
offers
and
or
paste
addendums,
on.
it's like, why mix and mingle, right? I just do it, yeah. So
Then
Shouldn't.
we should refill this out and attach it with a counter offer.
you don't have to refill it out. The counter offer will, just like everything else, like any other term, it will coincide.
In the
with it.
counter form, you would say car form SPBP, paragraph this, seller not to.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Take
yeah.
it right.
It's just another term. that
It's
you
just
have to
another
look
term.
at.
Yeah. Hold on, I know I have two questions over here.
More paper?
Last class that we were in with you, and I've also got my TC and assistant in the room. The EXP forms that were loaded up that we were told we have to use, we can choose, or we need them.
Yeah, so I can say that I know I didn't say anybody has to use them. We created them for the benefits of the agents because they are much more consumer friendly, but we do not require the use of the EXP forms. No, you can use either. Yes.
You're the listing agent and you end up representing the buyer. Okay, back to the B2 on the listing. If you ended up representing this other buyer.
No, so
Yeah. When bringing up the seller payment to buyer's broker, if that's checked, that they would get more money. I don't, it just seems like it's really.
okay, so for clarity purposes, the question on the listing agreement is referring to 2C2 where it says additional compensation to seller's broker if buyers unrepresented. So
2C2?
again, there's a lot of confusion around this. It is genuinely an unrepresented buyer.
Wait, what-
You're not represent 2C2. Nobody, let's say, I mean, and again, I know that circumstance is probably gonna be relatively rare, but let's just say as an example, there's an attorney out there that says, I don't need an agent. I don't want any, I'll represent myself. I know law, right? That stuff happens, or engineers, we all get the people that know the contracts and all that stuff,
I
right?
think they do.
Yeah, so it will happen, but it's gonna be pretty rare. But the concept is, it is genuinely an unrepresented buyer. And the reason why there might be a difference that you negotiate with your seller in a higher commission or a higher compensation amount is that you are essentially taking on a little bit more liability, right? And you're, for lack of a better explanation, being an admin, you're being a TC, you're shuffling paperwork back and forth and trying to catch stuff that the agent is normally doing on the other side. And so there's additional compensation, but it's not representation. If you're representing the buyer, then you get a buyer broker agreement.
No.
You've been patient, you've been patient.
I'm sorry, I have to.
Yeah.
I have to parlay off of Tom's question when he didn't have the BBA signed with the buyer. If he would have had the BBA signed and it had exclusive mark, there's been conversations about who do you go after if they choose another agent, right?
Right.
Do you go after the agent to say, hey, I got an exclusive agreement with my buyer and you just stole them from me? I mean, is there any recourse of that?
No, it's not agent to agent, because when you think about it, the brokerage has a contract with the buyer, just like the brokerage has a contract with the seller, right? On a listing agreement. So the contract is between, the broker. So the broker, just like a listing agreement, right? If they say, you know, I want to go list, the power with the listing agreements is it's already in the MLS. So another agent can't override the MLS, right? And so there's a bit of forced tendency to figure it out, right? The buyer broker agreement, we don't necessarily have that. So will it happen? Possibly. And again, that's what I was saying when Barry was asking. We're going to navigate that. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know what the people in this room are going to do, what the people in the state, what the industry. We don't want to say it's going to be this way or that way, because we just don't know. What we want to do is what's in our agent's best interests. And a lot of times, for the most part, your reputation is going to supersede that, right? You have to be the decision maker on that. Yeah. Question.
Navigating everything, could we could also consider if you could add a cancellation fee on the buyer broker agreement? So if, let's say you're 90 days and 30 days, they're like, oh, we want to work with another person, and you still have the 60 days left on the contract, they can easily cancel it, get out of it.
Yes. I'd like to get a little clarity on that. I mean, what I'm doing is I'm thinking comparatively between the listing agreement and the buyer broker agreement. If somebody wants to cancel the listing agreement, can we say, okay, well, I hosted those open houses, I did all this stuff, and in order for us to let you out, it's going to be right, whatever it may be. It is likely very similar to the buyer broker agreement, but I don't know that exact answer. That's something I'd want to double check with Car Legal. But I would assume or anticipate that it would be similar. Yeah. Yes.
So I have an agent on my team watching, Thomas Ligori. He said, because he advertises a lot on Zillow, and he said, what about third-party contracts, aka Zillow? They're talk that they're now issuing 7-day contracts.
Yes.
Are they gonna? I don't know what the.
So we are a big player. EXP is a big player, and we do a lot of business with Zillow. So we have actually been working really, really closely with Zillow. We actually developed our single property showing agreement as a result of Zillow's 7-day form. So that's kind of where ours came into play. Zillow's is completely unenforceable. So Zillow does have that showing agreement, but it's not binding to the terms of the NAR settlement. So it's more of a psychological.
We still have.
That's right. That's right. It's not binding.
So it's like prepping the clients that they know that this is happening. We still need them to sign ours.
That's right. Right. Because even if Zillow does have licensed agents, those licensed agents as realtors have to have a buyer broker agreement. So yeah, to her point, Zillow as a company isn't an agent, so that it's it's more psychological. Kind of, I hate to say this, but kind of like the buyer broker agreement was for a long time, right? Many people didn't use it because it was like, well, you know, I'm gonna get paid when I find the house because it's being offered through the MLS, right? And so it was more psychological. So yeah.
7 days.
So Zillow has created a 7-day showing agreement.
Okay.
That basically says, hey, I get a lead through Zillow, and we have an agreement for me to show you properties, and I think there is a maximum amount of properties. Forgive me, I don't know for sure, but for 7 days, I'm going to show you this property. So they're trying to utilize it as a buyer broker agreement, but it is not a buyer broker agreement. So if even though Zillow has that, and Zillow's gonna send it to the client, to the lead, they're gonna say, hey, here's this agreement. But then, once you get that lead, you have to, as an agent, because now you're talking, you're being a buyer broker, right? Whether you do a single party, right, or a single property or anything, but you're gonna have to subsequently do your own one outside of that Zillow one. I hope that answered the question for your team member.
What about like Zen list and off market? Like, what if we go to a listing and we want to market it to our 70,000 people of our database or our 86,000 agents on EXP? Do we have to require it? Because we're advertising it not on the MLS.
Yeah, so it's not, yeah, so it's not.
We don't have to do it all.
Yeah, so the MLS, so outside sources of marketing the property are not the MLS.
So we're clear. I wouldn't need to use this, but I'm doing it on Zen or.
So
Now, again, we don't, in the contract, in the listing agreement, we don't have an agreement that the seller is going to offer it. So if you're wanting to use a third-party website, you can't put in there what the offer compensation is because it's not contractually binding. You, again, you can put the language the seller is willing to consider.
So that's actually goes back to her question then. So it would be good to have in the listing agreement if we're gonna put that anywhere else, because then the seller can't say, I would never said that.
Right, yeah, yeah. And again, it's not binding in the listing agreement,
Right,
right?
but at least we talked about it.
It's you're having that conversation. And again, like I said, you're sitting down with a net sheet. Mr. Seller, there's gonna be buyers that don't have the money. The vast majority, in fact, of the
Don't have the
buyers,
money.
right, don't have the money. I want to prepare you. It's my job to prepare you, right?
So you recommend if we have the conversation with the seller and then we're talking about the little sign writer, we're gonna create a single party page website and advertise it and boost it. It's gonna say that we're offering potentially sellers willing to negotiate, then to for sure have that in the listing agreement so they don't come back and say, I never said that and you're doing wrong.
Yeah, I would.
You could say
Just to
buyer
protect
agent
yourself.
friendly in your marketing, is that a violation?
Nope, that's not a violation. Yeah. Yes,
Not on the MLS.
yeah, just not on the MLS. Yeah,
In your print app.
Or anything.
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can we go back to the SPV, the SPV?
Mhm.
So we currently have buyers who are buying a property, but it is not gonna close until September 1st. They have to get one of these from
If they-
the listing agent.
If they are currently in escrow, they will be grandfathered into whatever is currently being offered.
Okay, that's
If
what
they are not in escrow, moving forward, they should be doing
Okay,
this.
perfect.
Mhm.
Ryan, where did these?
Good job, Ryan.
I sorry, I heard somebody about form, sorry.
Where did these forms live, the buyer broker agreements, and for how long do we need to keep them?
Yeah, so again, SkySoap is creating essentially a repository for not just for us, for everybody to be able to use. I don't know when their dev team is going to be done with that. In the meantime, just hang on to it. Keep them as a PDF, right? Yeah, or give them to your CC, whatever it may be.
All right, guys, was this helpful?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. I know it's a lot.
Wait, can we ask one more question?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's pretty important for all of us to have listings right now, so.
Let's give them a standing up.
There's also gonna be a training 1 o'clock in the world, if you want to continue this conversation, 1 o'clock in the world, and then next Wednesday. Folsom.
That's the easy.
All right.
Okay.
Good day.
Good job, Ryan.
Thank you. I know it's a lot of it.